Good morning and a very warm welcome to Pan-African Friday. I am Rachel Takali, and this morning I have with me two other Pan-Africanists who will be discussing a number of pertinent issues as they develop. We will be talking in particular about patriotism, and we'll be going from level to level concerning what it really is, or what it should be, and the concerns that revolve around that subject. But before we go into more of that, I'd like to actually hear from Ndugu Rugarama concerning how his week has been, what has been or has stood out the most this particular week. Comments, Mr. Rugarama.
Thank you so much, Sister Takarir. And good morning to our dear viewers from wherever you may be watching us from. Good morning to Afande, Comrade Kawesa. And to me, this week, like you said, what stood out, because there was a very unfortunate incident, and I thought that the fires in schools had gone down, but it was unfortunate that we had an incident in Chamate, that boarding school, where one of the students was burnt, and it is highly suspected that either a group of students or some enemy infiltrated and caused that. So I find that one very revolting, and I would call upon the authorities, because they had reigned on that situation, the circumstances around fire outbreaks in schools had been, at least in the recent past, we've not had a lot of that, drawing from the incidences of Buddo Jr. So I found that one really very disturbing this week. We, as a country also, were horrified, because it has been in the media for such a long time, to hear that where my brother, I think, comes from, the iron sheets, the issue of the iron sheets. It is in the print and electronic and other forms of media, including social media. It has been debated here by both the general public and the government officials, that the iron sheets, which were meant for a particular vulnerable group of people, majority of the iron sheets never reached. And there is a lot of talk, and I think the Office of the Inspector General of Government has been drawn in to carry out investigations. Now, what is very disturbing in that particular instance is that there appear to be high-level government officials involved in this, and I'm not accusing anybody or condemning anybody, because somebody must be given an opportunity to be heard. I am only saying what is trending in the media, and I'm saying whatever it is not good. It doesn't smell good. So I would want also to conclude this week by noting what is happening on the international scene. The elections in Nigeria were concluded, and somebody who has been the governor of Lagos carried the day. But suffice to note that the opposition who have participated in this election, as I talk now, have petitioned court and the Electoral Commission has also been dragged in to have the results nullified and the exercise repeated because they are not satisfied. Now, this seems to be the trend, because you would ask the Takara, would ask now, what is so special about it? You see, what is so special about this is that what happens on the African continent, generally speaking, with elections, is that we do not have, generally speaking, we do not have people who come out to concede. But we have exceptions. There are those who have come out to concede and say, brother, you have won this. For them, you either win, like there used to be a slogan in Northcote, now no more, Sibiruga Hall, that I either win or you lose. Now that creates only one winner. And it appears to be the trend on the African continent that nobody concedes defeat. If I have not won, either I have been rigged out, and with that I will protest till the next election. When are we going to cooperate and have the patriotic spirit, which is our debate for today, to move the country, should the politics be above and over the interests of the country?
Thank you, Nduguru Garama. As you well know, those are some of the more pointed issues that have been transpiring in the course of the week. But I also have the privilege this morning of welcoming one of our own Pan-Africanists who is new to our setting, but of course a veteran in these affairs. Welcome, Major Chigozi Kawesa.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And
good morning, my sister and brother.
Thank you for being with us.
It is a pleasure that I'm joining this wonderful team. And it is also, I think, gratifying that somebody noticed that probably I have some contribution I can make to making Africa better. And I think that's what all of us should do. Asking ourselves, what is it that you have done? What is it that you are capable of doing? And probably, what is it that you are left with that you can still contribute to making one? There was this singer who said the world a better place.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah. What is it that we can do to make our world a better place?
That is a very important place to find ourselves. I'm standing in for Ndugu James Mututa, who is unable to join us today. But we still have to go forward with our Pan-African cause. Nduguru Garama, talking about the issue of patriotism, and that is the reason we're here today, I would like to hear more about the situation that is unfolding in North Africa, Arab Africa, if you will. The people of Northern Africa have distinguished themselves at this time, Tunisia in particular, and they are not demonstrating very patriotic values from an African point of view. Is that the case, or do you believe they're doing exactly what they should be doing?
You remember clearly, Comrade Takari, that we have had almost similar discussions around the Pan-African credentials of a majority of our brothers and sisters on the African continent. And in a majority of the cases, especially in the northern part of Africa, we have come to a conclusion that one can easily and honestly impeach, especially these days, because in the past, nobody would take away the Pan-African credentials of our brothers in Morocco, our brothers in Tunisia, because as you very well remember, the Casablanca, for instance, conference towards the formation of the Organization of African Union was the one which was fronting and being headed by Kwame Nkrumah. You must also remember that Kwame Nkrumah actually had his wife, who was an Egyptian. And therefore, you can see that the Pan-African credentials, the togetherness of the African continent, was very well not really tagged to the racial differences, but they were looking at the bigger picture, that you would have a country like Tunisia, which were at the forefront of making sure that the apartheid in South Africa was done away with. I'm skirting around to create a fertile ground to answer your particular question. That the Abdul Gamars of the then leading Egypt had no any marked difference with senior comrade Dr. Osejefo Kwame Nkrumah at that time, that it was not only proper that they would, Kwame Nkrumah would get a wife who was Arabic, or Arab for that matter, of the Arabic origin from Egypt, and she becomes his wife. But it was also that Egypt would give everything to buttress the argument of Kwame Nkrumah, whereby he said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless without achieving total independence of the African continent. Now, what I'm saying is that when we get some of these ugly scenes like we were seeing in South Africa at one time, the xenophobic attacks, even there, I have issues with the definition of xenophobia, the way it is defined. Because if we go into the nitty-gritties, which we don't intend to go into now, you will find that the definition itself has got problems. But when you look at, for instance, what has been happening in Tunisia, and the kind of treatment they have been giving our
the Ivorian and Guinean nationals.
Guineans, Ivorians, nationals, is not any different from what the South Africans were actually giving the Zimbabweans and Nigerians. Now, what becomes of special interest that we have not had time to talk about actually is that the darker-skinned people in, for instance, north, particularly north of Africa, have not been treated so well. I will tell you that the treatment of some of our darker, a little bit darker skinned people in Egypt has not been fair. The darker skinned people in Morocco has not been fair.
And Mauritania.
In Mauritania, it is
and
a sad story. There is also in Morocco. One time, I will tell you this and our audience, we are moving in the equivalent of, in Casablanca, in the equivalent of Owino, what you would call Owino, of theirs, doing some shopping. And the women in the market, they were asking us how Africa is. And the person I had at that time, a very tried and tested and proven Pan-Africanist, took of time to educate the women who were in that market that actually Morocco was so much Africa. And therefore, for them to ask such a question was nothing but cementing the all along held view by the rest of the Africans that Morocco and some of these North African countries had a lot of ignorance in as far as the matters of the continent are concerned. Therefore, the patriotism levels, and if we have to look at patriotism as the love, the feel of one's country. Now, there is a difference, I want to believe, and I think probably as we progress in this debate, we are going to get to the grips with what actually differentiates patriotism from nationalism. Is nationalism necessarily the same thing as patriotism? Okay, let us assume that patriotism is the unquestioned love, strong feeling for one's country. Is a country defined by the geographical boundaries? At what point do we depart from brotherhood and comradeship and we start looking at countryman and countrywoman? To me, therefore, as I wind up on this very question, the activities of the Tunisians, of the so-called lighter skin to their counterparts and comrades on the African continent, like anywhere else, including Morocco and some of the writers, if you go to the film industry in Egypt, you're going to see some of these unfortunate instances that my sister Takari, you are bringing up, the segregation because the other Egyptian is of a darker skin, and it happens in Morocco, it happens in Tunisia, it happens in majority of North Africa, speaks to high levels of ideological bankruptcy. And that's what, as Pan-Africanists, we must address.
That is a very important position to actually articulate. For those of us who are not in the know concerning what has been going on in Tunisia, the president of that country, Kais Saied, is on record saying that the recently arrived immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa are changing the demographic makeup of his country, that they're disproportionately contributing to crime, and he's also on record having denied that he's a racist. But it is also the people of Tunisia, according to BBC findings, who say that 80% of them say that they believe that their country is actually racist, which is a higher figure than all of the Middle East in terms of what the nationals believe pertains in their very midst. In fact, the statements of this President Saied have led to many immigrants losing their jobs overnight. Some of them have been thrown out of their lodgings. Definitely the countries of Guinea and the country of Ivory Coast have chartered planes to speedily get their nationals out of that country because of the rising racist sentiments. That brings me to where we are, Major Kawesa.
Yes.
This issue of patriotism, in fact, I know that a person like President Saied of Tunisia would claim that he's a patriot. After all, patriotism is about loving one's country. After all, it's about championing the welfare of one's society. After all, it's demonstrating devotion. After all, it's vigorously supporting the ideals of a political community, a nation, or a people. What is your assessment concerning where we stand in Uganda, for example?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, allow me allude to some Chiganda saying that if you are selling meat from a cow's head, you first touch yours to get to know how much flesh is on the head for you to determine the price.
Okay.
We have had situations in Uganda where people want to behave similar to what you are describing in Tunisia. Uganda is one country that is only stabilizing in the last 35 years. But we've had situations when Ugandans would love being away from their country. And it was safer for Ugandans to be in Kenya, for Uganda to run across the border through the marshland. I listened to a former president, one-to-one. I had the opportunity to talk to the late Chusi Godfrey Lukonga Binaisa. And he was saying that mwana wange, nali sagala bangambe na konti goba the president, that when he was reaching Kenya, having walked through a marshland, somebody said, aren't you the one we see on TV as president of the other? I said, no, Sienze. Literally meaning that I'm not the one, I'm not the one.
You wanted to forget.
Yeah, not to forget, but he did not want to be associated because he didn't know what would follow thereafter. So, patriotism goes beyond borders. That's what I wanted to say. Because for a country to exist, you must appreciate that you cannot lead an island life. The other day, I think in 2001, there was a talk here when we were looking for votes, and people were saying, Banyarwanda. Then I challenged that individual that if you said this publicly, probably when you go back home, you may not eat supper. What did I mean? That maybe as you talk to us here and you're on radio, TV, if the wife at home is watching you, you may find if she's not a first line Munyarwanda, probably she's a second Munyarwanda, having been fathered or sired by probably one of the parents being a Munyarwanda. And this is because maybe you need to also to go back to our history. I normally tell people that there are people who are older than Uganda. And when I say these people don't understand me. Because when did Uganda become Uganda? When you read the constitution, they say anybody who was in Uganda by, is it 1st April of 1926? What does this mean? That probably by that time, before that time, maybe Uganda was not there. The territory where Uganda is was there. But the description of that territory as Uganda was not. So, for somebody to describe and demarcate from the rest of the world, Uganda, it was done on the 1st of April. Or the last draw design was made that time. What does this bring me to? That maybe some people found themselves in Uganda either unconsciously or without their consent. So there is a likelihood that there are some people who would have lived in Uganda and are finding themselves in a different country today. And the best example we have is, you remember Agrawori?
Yes.
Agrawori was a presidential candidate here. But
Uganda.
at that material very time when he was contesting to become a Ugandan president, his brother was a vice president. Blood brother, same mother, same father. And I'm told the father was somebody reverend. But the brother was...
in the Republic of Kenya.
In the Republic of Kenya as a vice president. And when you look at the two constitutions, they are very clear about who ascends to the presidency. That you must be a citizen by descent. Now here are two brothers from the same mother, same father. They are citizens by descent of two different countries. How does this come about?
Effects of 1884.
So you can also joke around it, that when we are building houses for us locally, and probably you are building it locally and you have not been to a town council authority to give you approval, you can have a situation when your sitting room is in Uganda and the bedroom is in Kenya. It is a possibility.
Yes,
because the boundaries we have are just artificial lines that may not even be known to some of us. You only go at the customs and you are told you are entering Kenya. If there is no such writing, you can fetch firewood in Kenya, go and cook in Uganda, fetch water in Sudan, go and graze in Congo, because these boundaries cut through or divided societies that harmoniously coexisted.
So
and when you look at just using language as an illustration, there are more actually speakers in South Sudan than there are in Uganda. Do you know this?
Yes, and more Aluru in Congo.
We have been talking about, this one has been talking about Karamoja. I was recently in Karamoja, and the Kenyans had just been in an election. And a recently elected governor visited Moroto. And what is so interesting, that when he was addressing the council of Moroto,
A Kenyan governor,
he was speaking in a language that is clearly understood by the Karimajong. But for me, who is a Ugandan, I was Angazi. So a Kenyan could speak a Ugandan language and the Ugandans understand him, and me, a Ugandan, I couldn't understand. What does this bring? That we are the same. So when you refer to somebody because he comes from across the border as a foreigner, in my own appreciation, I think you lack patriotism. He could just be a brother across. That's why we are even talking about integration. Can we bring so when you talk about integration and you want to bring East Africans together, some people think probably you are bringing any people, you are bringing any problems, but we have lived together for so many years. And historians tell us that even where you are, you were a visitor if you went into history. How did the Bantu come? How did the Luo come? How did the Nairo Hamites? We have been on the move. We are only settling probably because of the population increase. But otherwise, the Bantu who are here originate from Congo, others say from as far as Ghana. And when you look at even the languages, have you heard the South Africans sing Kaperi de Nyamayanga?
Yes,
What does it mean? I was asking, and somebody said, the pusscat has eaten my meat. And I understand it in Uganda, so many miles away.
Zambia here, and you see.
The names, Mugabe. Isn't Mugabe a Chiganda name, a Chinyankole name, or a Chisoga name?
Even there is a Kamara in West
A
Africa.
Kamara in West Africa.
In South Africa,
We are
Karabo
the same.
is a gift. It's the same here.
So, I remember I think in 1998, I was working as a personal assistant to some senior government official, and we received visitors from Congo. They were speaking French and I was speaking English, and we failed to communicate. So they chose to go into their language to backbite me, and I was following. So the language they spoke was similar to Lutoro. So they have Batoro in Congo,
They have a Tuku kind of thing.
they have Baganda in Tanzania. So we are the same. So
There are Samias in Kenya.
no, in fact, there are
And
more
Gisus
Samias
in
in
There are more
Kenya.
Samias in Kenya
And
than
Gishus in
Uganda.
Kenya.
And
Even
when-
Tesos in Kenya.
And when you see the athletes, and it is on in the international scene, and somebody Cherengati, you may think you need to be very careful to look at the jersey they are wearing. Majority of the Cherengatis, you find them in Kenya, and they are in Uganda. So let us simply see how we can coexist, whether color or name it. By the way, and the word is globalized. Today, you may find, I don't know, if someone asked me to remove everything Chinese, I may walk out of this studio naked.
Very true.
You may find the pen I'm holding is Chinese, the kabukulet probably is Chinese, the coat is Congolese. And we need each other. And if there is any leader anywhere who thinks that he can close his borders and only serve or survive from his own people alone without interacting with the rest of the world, you can no longer survive. Because we need each other, not only for trade, but for survival. Because good neighborliness is African. Good neighborliness is African. The Baganda say, he talked about fires in schools. So if fire caught your house, I don't know whether because our houses we are grass thatched, there is a likelihood, we call it omuyonga. A ball of fire can easily be blown by the wind and land on the neighbor's house. So when your house is on fire, the neighbors must be concerned. When we have problems, the neighbors must be concerned. So this business of jobs, well, maybe what I need to appeal to fellow brothers, I know either Africans or otherwise, that when you go, is it a Chiganda saying that says, that if you have bad habits, they go ahead of you? Because if somebody is complaining that there is a rise in crime because of immigrants, let us not complain, let us check ourselves. If you go to visit, why do you engage in crime?
Theft.
I have talked to some brothers in South Africa recently. We had brothers dying there. And the rumor was that fellow Ugandans were killing each other over business, over rival, over women, or even over just taking over. Because if I know we are in South Africa and I'm the only one who knows about what you own, I kill you and take it. Me, I think sometimes we may be blaming other societies that are rejecting us. But are we behaving well to satisfy our hosts' appreciation of our being there? That would be my take.
I think you bring up a number of important observations. Could it be that we have failed to appreciate, for example, the historical context that informs where we should be in terms of patriotism? Is it even old style to talk about national patriotism? Should we now aspire to regional patriotism and international patriotism? Those are questions that we can answer as we go back and forth. But Ndugu Rugarama, there are 4 tenets that govern the patriotism question. The first being the love or the passion for the society in which that patriotism is true. The second one is being able to identify oneself, an attachment to that nation or group that you claim to be patriotic about. The third tenet is, of course, being concerned about the welfare of that particular group. And the fourth, which is very well emphasized here in Uganda, is the issue of sacrifice for the particular cause that you're championing. But giving oneself and vigorously supporting the concept that is patriotism is not all there is. Have we misunderstood the whole concept, Nduguru Garama?
Yes, to directly answer your question, yes, I think we have not yet come to terms with the progressive definition of patriotism. We were here about 2 months ago, and I vividly remember it was you, Sister Takari, who was unpackaging the concept of citizenship. And we were like, in the context of the East African community, it does not help for one to carry out an argument, and you lose it actually along the way when you keep emphasizing your Ugandanness, your Kenyanness. If we are talking about regional groupings, even if they are not necessarily economic blocks, of course we know that the East African community, for instance, has got levels under which it wants to metaphasize up to when we get a political entity called the East African country, if you like. Because the desires of our forefathers and our foremothers during the time of the formation of Organization of African Unity, like Dr. Nkwame Nkrumah said, was to have one country. The formation of the OAU, now African Union, the initial interest and the desire, as was propagated by those who subscribed to the Casablanca bloc, forget about the brothers of the Monrovia, I have always mentioned this, was that we should live out of this conference with one army, with one country, and we can have just ministers in different parts of the African continent. The reasoning then, and I think it is still very relevant, was that it makes a lot of sense to see beyond an individual, to see beyond the geographical expressions that were actually brought to life during the 1884-85 Berlin Conference, where our colonial masters then, the Germans, the English, the Belgians, the French, sat in Berlin for about a whole year, because it stretched from 1884 to 1885, and started doing what my brother Kawesa here was saying, arbitrarily
chopping,
divided Africa and gave it to themselves. He said, now you will take this, and along the way you realize that they would even exchange, because you remember who was the first in Tanganyika, then later they changed. Then you remember the case of Rwanda and Burundi. So we were just nothing but properties to these colonial masters, and they would exchange us at their own will. So the geographical boundaries that we talk about here, which passionately really is your question, Sister Takari, is nothing but something that was given to us not through a referendum by ourselves, and indeed, like senior brother, Comrade P.O. Lumumba has always emphasized, there is a joke, and I think Major explained it further here, that it was very easy at the conclusion of the 1884-85 Berlin Conference for a woman who is married to somebody who was now, who now says, I'm in Uganda, a country that was called Uganda, and the boundary is drawn from there, who had gone to visit in Kenya to find herself there, and she would be a Kenyan. But the joke was more closer, that you would wake up, a man and a woman would wake up the following day. If you're on this side of the bed, you would be a Kenyan, and their side of the bed, you would be a Ugandan. Of course, that was to dramatically bring the picture home, that look how callous, how very disturbing some of these decisions that the colonial masters took, where the element of patriotism then is not what it should be now. Why? You see, if, for instance, at the material time, the countries we are talking about on the African continent, for instance, the forefathers saw it and they said, we must kill these geographical boundaries by way of closely working together, identifying ourselves as being the same. I will tell you also, just before I lose this point, that part of the why, for instance, the Organization of African Union didn't get the kind of results it got like the board Casablanca group had wanted, is because the colonial master then, working in very subterranean of ways, had infiltrated the patriots at that time. For instance, they had gone to Ethiopia and convinced the emperor that he was much more than a president of a country. And there is no way he could come together with Abdul Gamar's, with the Ben Bera's, with Julius Nyerere's, to be on the same footing. And in order, the clever, may his soul rest in eternal peace, the clever man that we had in Osejefoa, he realized that he was going to lose the emperor. And as a compromise, that is why the Organization of African Union, for instance, was headquartered, part of the reason was headquartered in Addis Ababa, so that they could bring him closer and they show him that he was more powerful. But you remember, if you go back to the archives, and UBC is gifted that some of these documents are still there, and you read the speech of Kwame Nkrumah, he says that I would propose from here that the headquarters of African, of the United States of Africa can be in Bangor, can be in Brazzaville. But I am open to any other suggestions. What did that mean? That he was looking at some, because those areas I'm talking about are very central when you look at the African map. But the point I'm making, therefore, is that as we have progressed over time, our dear viewers and comrades in the studio, the concept of patriotism is no longer about your Ugandanness, is no longer about your Catholicism, Protestantism or Anglicanism, your Muslim nature, is no longer about your tribe, you are being a Muganda, you are being a Mnyankore, you are being a Nachori, you are being a Musoga. It's much bigger. We are looking at interests. The patriotic nature of a human being is now defined in terms of the bigger picture. Because I was looking at a more refined definition of patriotism. There is a major in India, Major Reeve, and he was defining patriotism through an explanation. He was telling his audience that when I joined the army, and my parents who had encouraged me to join the army, they missed me, I would not regularly go to see them. And my mother constantly wrote to me to make sure that I come and visit them. Then this particular Major Reeve writes back and says, dear mother, all my colleagues have taken a leave. Now, if I take leave at the same time, or even continuously take leave as I'm supposed to, it means that this country, India, will have nobody to serve it. Now, you see, then he continues to say, therefore, when I realized as Major Reeve that my interests had been sacrificed at the altar of the interests of India as a country, I realized that I was growing into a very robust patriot.
Patriot.
So, in that case, therefore, you can see where we are headed, Sister Takari. In that case, therefore, patriotism to me is not how strongly you feel. And this is why I think the battle, I think the Afande here will bear me witness, and our dear viewers. This is a battle we have been having, where our patron of the Pan-African movement, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, has been battling this issue of, and I think it was part of the 10-point program. Now 15, I don't know how many points we have now. Anyhow, what was there was that sectarianism was a backward form of it should be purged out of the practices of a country like Africa and under NRA, NRM. Therefore, the point really is that we have progressed, and as we form regional blocks, as we expand, the concept of patriotism is no longer about your country, geographical country, but it's about a huge block where interests, socio-economic, are satisfied.
And I think that is really where we need to be, because the more you observe the happenings in today's world, the more you come to the conclusion that these small nation states that we have been so focused on are not the future. The future is really, I think, the concept that originated in the colonial era, and that is the African nationalism. Of course, that was informed by self-determination that still has its roots in today's society. But when we return after this break, Ndugu Kawesa, you'll be bringing us up to speed concerning where we are in actually furthering the course of African nationalism.
democracy. During the 1960s, Murchison Falls was not only the most visited park in Uganda, but also among the most popular in all of Africa.
With nature being in its full HD here at Murchison Falls National Park, this is an ultimate tourism destination.
The scenery is one of the most beautiful attractions here.
I got excited also, and I'm here with my family also. They're all excited, and this is the place I can say people has to visit.
Welcome back to Pan-African Friday, and I'd like to acknowledge that here in a few days, on March 8th, we, the women of the world, will be celebrating ourselves. Sorry, Nduguru Garama. Sorry, Major Kawesa. But we'll be acknowledging ourselves as you watch, hopefully.
You have to coexist with us. We are not bad.
I think we don't need to get worried.
Okay.
Because what I know is that, like, if I may borrow what the teachers say, their slogan, the nation is because we are.
Oh, yeah.
And we are because the nation is so. The women are because the men are.
Okay.
And we are because the women are. I don't think any of us can exist
Without
the other. So we need each other. So as you celebrate, we are behind you in the celebrations.
Thank you so much.
Side by side.
Still continuing with our issue of patriotism, you set the stage, Major Kawesa, when you talked about the fact that the African country or the African state or the African nation, and with particular emphasis on the small nation states, are not together necessarily by choice, given our colonial history, but we are at a place where we now have to forge some kind of partnership if this whole concept is to take place. But you also observed during the break that the present states, having been carved out by the colonial master, he really does not have a vested interest in a patriotic Africa or a nationalistic Africa. As if to underline this, the French president is currently on tour of 4 African nations as we talk. He's expected in DRC Congo. He has his plans to go to Congo Brazzaville. He also has plans to visit Gabon and Angola. But it is still along these lines of dividing the African people. Remember, the people of Mali are very bitter with France. The people of Burkina Faso are similarly bitter. And a number of West African states where France was a colonial master really want nothing to do with France going forward. And so he's starting his own counteroffensive to open up new territory to the same colonial approach of yesteryear. But the people of DRC are saying they don't want him anywhere near them, and they plan, I don't know if they actualize this, they plan to actually demonstrate and tell France he has not been kind to them, and they really don't want the colonizers' hands in their affairs. So, Ndugu Kawesa, where does that leave us as Africans in terms of being patriotic or in terms of furthering African nationalistic ideals?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, the Swahili call a primary school Shule la Msingi, the foundation of education. What is it that we are given while we are beginning education? And the first cut is the deepest. And the education system, I think, across the divide in Africa is, I think, colonial designed, I should say. I'm not very much traveled, but I read. When you go across all the English-speaking countries, you'll find that everything over there is British designed. And when you go to the French, I think it is. I've been to Cameroon, briefly Burundi and Congo, not very far, but when you look at them, they behave the same. They love a lot of music, they love very fancy things, and I'm told this is French-like. And all the fancy things they really admire and they want to use come from France. And here, you know the talk, chuma cha muzungu, UK British made, England, it was implanted in us. You know, sometimes we're even our own slave masters because we take our slaves there. And anybody who wants to disentangle us from that, we even call him an enemy, the way we speak English. And I think even my court, if somebody would say, I know the way you have, if I don't now have a tie, probably I'm not very good British-like. Now, I remember my primary teacher told me, and I passed primary by there very well, by parroting lies.
The white man's education you passed.
Yes, very well, but I was parroting things. And one of the things I remember is that, why was Africa called a dark continent? And the answer was a very good one. We sang it like a creed, that because nothing much in the inside of Africa was known to the rest of the world. You passed, they clapped, you even lifted, and if there was a gift of a plastic cup, you were given. For cramming and reciting lies that make you enslaved perpetually. Now, didn't Africa, now, if you don't know about me, between me and you, who is ignorant? So was it Africa that was dark, or the rest of the world that didn't know much about us that were in the dark? I think the latter is correct. But we took ourselves to be a darker continent and we appreciate. Then they tell you, no, we were savages, that these people came to enlighten us, to civilize us. We killed each other, we never related with any other. Just look, I just use Uganda as your case study. When you look at what we value here, spears, beads, and more importantly, if you look to, allow me use, because I come from the central, allow me use the Chiganda ways of doing things. I normally ask my listeners, and if they are near me, that what are qualities of good money? People give them, I don't know whether any of us here can remember. They say it must be strong, easily divisible, acceptable, scarce. And those are the answers they give. What was the Buganda currency at the advent of the British? It were the cowries, cowrie shells. Don't they fit into that? They are hard to get because they come from the ocean. They are strong because even if you dropped them, so they are stronger than the 50,000 note. A cowrie shell is thrown about in the wind or in the mud or water, will stay even tomorrow. Easily, it was acceptable, and the rest of it. Now, what does this tell you? That before the Mzungu came, Buganda had a connection with the sea. But we are told we are dark, we are savages, we didn't relate with the neighbors.
And uncivilized.
There were sea routes that we used to take our goods and bring those that we didn't manufacture. We exchanged, and we knew values in butter. If the Baganda produced this, the Bateso produced the other, the Bachiga the other, we exchanged and survived. And can you trade with somebody you don't relate with? So we related with each other. So when the Mzungu comes, he finds this good network of societies relating and trading with each other. He had to disorganize it, because if we remained united, it was not easy to subdue us. So even what we call tribal differences are a recent invent by the colonial master to keep us divided. Don't even look at boundaries yet. We have internal boundaries where Muganda looks at Munyora as a problem, then the Muteso looks at Karamojonga as a problem, the Musoga looks at Mugiso as a problem, and yet we related and traded and married from across each other. And our history is even better. When you look at, they say the Kabaka of Uganda is related to the Acholi, is related to the Jaluos, because of the history. But today, each of us wants to we look at each other inside. Then even when the Baganda relate, then they are divided by Catholics, Protestants. Then they have
money, poverty.
Yes. So people who are together, who are living together. So even as you talk about patriotism, you need to go back almost a century and start from there and build and bring the good values that kept us together. Now, this same colonial master, even when he lives, he left us, I think, we could be, I think, I don't know who talks about it, that the first rulers of independent Africa were colonial masters in black skin. And indeed, it is true, because there are even people who prefer getting back to the colonial times, because some African masters or leaders have not done enough to make us realize that we are independent and free. Some of them may not be blamed because they are products of the others and they could have been left here to continue with the status quo then. Now, getting back to now Pan-Africanism, it is not an easy task, because if, like for us fighters, and the defenders of the nations, societies, and even your guards. I can't be your bodyguard, but I can only protect you if I am protected. I don't know whether you have ever thought about this.
Not really.
If I'm not secure, can I protect you? Then you're insecure. So if we don't love ourselves as individuals, as smaller entities, as nations, then you'll have issues with even Pan-Africanism. Because you must first love yourself. Even this Christian teaching that love your neighbor just as you love yourself. So if you hate yourself, then your neighbor is in trouble. So that's why we must emphasize and inculcate values of love, of loyalty, of commitment to our own societies. Then later on, after we love ourselves as Kigozi Kawesa, as a Muganda, as a Catholic, as a Ugandan, as an educationalist, then it becomes easier to relate with others and also love them. Because I will discover that in order for my continuity, I need a Kenyan. If I grow maize and it is the Kenyans that eat maize, then I need them. Otherwise, if I grow maize and nobody buys it, then I am useless. I cannot survive. If, like for instance, environmentalists, we say, can we let the trees live? Then you say, what are the trees? Then you take the individual to appreciate that the oxygen you breathe in that makes you continue with life is related to having trees. So you need the trees and the trees need you. So this is the science. So in the same way, let us first love ourselves as individuals. Let us make Ugandans appreciate that they are an important entity that needs to survive. But in order for them to survive as Ugandans, they will need many things. Like, for instance, continuity of society, continuity of Uganda, continuity of the economy, continuity of the environment, continuity of very many other things that make us survive. Because there are people who think that in order for me to love Uganda, Uganda must first love me. Then you ask yourself, you ask them, by the way, you may be right, but where is and who is Uganda? It is you who makes Uganda. So love yourself, then make Uganda better, then Uganda will pay back in return, because it is you who is the primary valuable asset Uganda has, and it is you to make the other assets. Like for instance, when we talk about, I think it is the human resource people who call, because people talk about capital and resources, and you tell them the most important resource is the human being. And if you're talking about resources in a country, the most important resource in a country is man. It is that man who must take advantage of all of the others deliberately and consciously for him to survive and for the nation and the country to survive and continue.
It's interesting that when some of these concepts are actually explained from our different points of view. Nduguru Garama, hearing what Major Kawesa has just been explaining, it seems to me that patriotism in relation to the African state or nation is a myth. Or African nationalism is also a myth, because the basis we had for this was destroyed a long time ago. Is that your view?
Interestingly, anybody listening to us, you know, we have got one biggest enemy to our development, and this enemy is called resignation. Some of our colleagues have resigned to the prevalent fate, and the fate is that there is nothing the African man is capable of doing. And that does not come from nowhere. It comes from somewhere, because there is a group of people, and we are here discussing that the colonial master never left. When he did pretend that he left after he had been constantly and seriously fought, and then he appeared to have physically left our continent, he went, and in the place of direct colonialism, he introduced neo-colonialism. So the neo-colonial agenda is alive and well, and make no mistake about that. And what is worrying is that a crop of the African leaders, both at the political, social, and economic fronts, have carefully been trained for a very long time in the colonial master schools and institutions. They have been armed with techniques and abilities, and they are the ones who are taking focal leadership on the African continent and elsewhere. So much that it is very difficult, like we have observed here, very difficult. I'm not saying it is impossible, it is just difficult to therefore practice effectively patriotism, Pan-Africanism, among others. But the fact that it is not impossible, because if we therefore resign, if we give up and we say, we have been told time and again that we are unable to be masters of our situation, to make ourselves better than we were yesterday, and that must be our fate, as we have been told. The first defeat, like Mongobeti says in Poor Christophe Bomba, the moment you start doubting your mission, you are on your way to failure, if you have not failed already. We cannot, as the African person, as the African people, and I'm saying as the African person, because patriotism is not necessarily something to do, a concept to do with the people of the darker skin. Because see, we forget that we actually have got Chinese who are of a darker skin. They are there in Asia, people of the darker skin.
Indians.
That we have got Indians.
Australians.
Who are of darker skin. Actually, the Aboriginals in Australia are the natives of Australia. They were just wiped out, just like the primitive whites wiped out the people of the Americans.
And the Maoris are also dark.
In America, whom they refer to derogatorily as the Red Indians. So the point really here is that, look, whereas I can listen and try to understand somebody who says, look, really, patriotism, what are you talking about? Because you remember, when our patron, the president of the country of Uganda, was launching this patriotism, and my senior comrade, General Masco, now was given that responsibility of championing the patriotism club secretariat, I can assure you there were voices who came out in the media to say, but how do you teach somebody to love their country? It should be automatic. No, nothing is automatic. I can assure you that even a child is taught to love, right from, is taught to, because that's why we have got what we call socializing agents. These socializing agents, you remember in the discipline called sociology, there we have got home, we have got school. Now, of course, we have got church. You know, it is either mosque or a church or something like that. And of course, we have got community, where these are socializing agents. They will make you what you call the environment.
And today you may even need to add on the media.
Media. So at the end of the day, these agents will make you turn into what you finally turn into because of what you've been exposed to. Therefore, the patriotism as a concept, Pan-Africanism as a concept, by the way, which are pillars if you go to the government in the leadership now, these are, they are two, or patriotism is one of the 4 pillars upon which NRM rotates. Now, the members of NRM, be it in leadership and those who are supporters, must appreciate and they must have had this in mind. I hope that those who are at the forefront of leadership and putting the ideals and goals of this government into practice appreciate what it meant to have the things like Pan-Africanism and patriotism in the Constitution. Otherwise, we shall keep talking, those of us who can talk, but as long as the implementers are the agents of neo-colonialism, we are not going to go very far. But patriotism, which, since it is our subject of discussion today, has been subjected to a lot of battering. Because what is surrounding us on the African continent, especially, not that I'm in any way saving the so-called developed countries, Western Europe, America itself, North America, USA, they claim to be patriots. For instance, Ku Klux Klan, you remember these people who thought that for them they were very American. You remember when President Trump came and he said, America first. You remember, because all this, they will describe them as patriotic acts. You remember the gruesome activities up to now that the Israelis carry out and meant out against the Palestinians, which they claim are patriotic acts. They recruit, they train every Israeli in military acts to make sure that they are defending the country. Even if that meant like they are doing barricading the medical supplies going to the Palestinian hospitals, even if that meant using the most of the lethal weapons, which of course the international media is not going to report, and against the Palestinians, children and women, even if that meant cutting off power, which they do from the health facilities, even if that meant making sure that they stop every help, supply, medical, otherwise,
financial,
from yes, on the ocean. The other time they bombarded a ship which was bringing medical supplies to Palestine. They will do it and they call it patriotism.
Love of nation.
In South Africa, apartheid, the Boers considered themselves to be patriotic because they were segregating systematically against the natives, the blacks. So patriotism, therefore, is no longer that small, is no longer looked at in the eyes, on the lenses of that small perspective of my own tribe, my own people around me. Patriotism is now a global concept in the sense that the interests, and my brother here, Major Kawes said it, as long as the interests, if I am producing something for my livelihood and I must sell it, I'm not going to sell it to the people who are actually producing the same. That being the case, therefore, patriotism must be defined in a broader sense, whereby people who are not necessarily of the same clan, of the same geographical location, must coexist because the interests are intertwined.
I think that observation is something that opens our eyes concerning where we need to go. Many times, as you said, we are confined to our immediate spaces, but the world has moved on. You cannot function without appreciating exactly what you need to do to make sure that your neighbor's contribution to your own welfare is actually beneficial in every way. But Major Kawesa, they have to be prominent examples of patriotism, not just nationally, but also on the continent. What are some of those that stand out for you?
Well, I don't need to go far. There are quite a number here. You can even look into our history. There are people who stood for what is good for themselves as individuals and their societies. And some of them have been highlighted. In Sibirwa, you've heard about him?
Used to be a Katikyo.
Yeah, that there was a time
He also
when there was
need
to have land given to a university or to an institution, because I don't think at that time it
his
was
own land.
No, it was, I think, society land, but others were opposed.
They
even say that he could have lost his life because of that. I could talk about Musazi. For all the years, when you read about him, when you even go at his home, he is a man who stood for what was good for Uganda, and he lived to it. Lule, we can come to our president has walked the talk, and over the years, he has lived to the patriotism he is preaching. When you listen to his talk, sometimes you may even know what he's about to say next, because he is consistent about love for Uganda. He's about love for the interests of Uganda, the interests of Africa, the interests of the globe, because he has even gone where many others don't want to go because they don't want to be associated with that. But he is somebody who stands out to be counted on the side of what is right for Uganda, right for Africa, and right for humanity. Now, a lot is being said about love, teaching, and the rest of it. I am a Catholic, and my Catholicism is not inborn. Many people, you ask them, why are Catholic? Why? Because my parents were Catholics. Yes and no. If they are Catholics and they don't deliberately take the effort to Catholize you, for us who are Baganda, wherever you go, at any very function, they say, Kabaka Wangari, Omwagalanga nyo. It is being emphasized repeatedly and being told to you, to inculcate it into you. Because people ask, how did I love my Kabaka? You don't love him. You don't love him accidentally.
It's not inherent.
No. It is prepared and over time. My faith is prepared over time. So even the commitment and love to your country, society around you must deliberately use every effort and every opportunity around it to make you Ugandan. Now, when we talk about Uganda, there are also interests that are national. They may not be written like a survivor and continent of us. If anybody, because is it I think it's still among the Baganda who say that if one wants to scratch you where it pains most, he backbites your mother in your presence. I don't know whether there is an English similar saying, but
English is limited. It is our local languages which are rich.
Ugandans have interests, and when you're a patriot and somebody plays about with those interests, that's why sometimes some of us fight or choose to belong to the institutions we belong to, because we must stand to be counted and be seen.
And to protect and
further. To protect the interests of Ugandans, the interests of Uganda, the interests of Africa. Because if we don't, probably nobody will. You've just told us about some big president visiting. I look at it like normally people over the weekend go to visit their farms to see whether the cows are doing well and to put things right. Probably that's what some of these people come to do. I remember I was a deputy at DC in Kampala here at the time of Chogam. And I was always hesitant. I said, now, we have been criticizing this woman as somebody who exploited us. And here we are celebrating that she's coming here. And but you saw how excited we were and how happy we were that our former colonizer was coming to visit us. And I think that is the
power of propaganda and soft power.
Yeah, propaganda, but even education. That you were Englishanized.
They are better.
And when the English topmost is coming, definitely you must celebrate, you must leave everything.
Repaint every building.
Receive him, and we planted grass. There is even some grass here we call chogam. But it wouldn't be bad if now we take each other as equal partners. Because among the locally they say it could be a thief, and the following day confess and repent and become part of. But they are thieves who only change their skins, or they steal better. The other time they could have been grabbing by force, but today they use your children to ferry the goods they are stealing from your garden. They remain thieves if they are taking them without your consent. Now, patriotism in our own sense here. We went to school like you have been told. I want to remind Ugandans that the Constitution mandates us to be patriotic. And they say one of the duties of every citizen is to be patriotic and loyal to Uganda and to promote its well-being. It is something broad. How many of us love Uganda, are loyal to it, and we do everything to promote its well-being? Remember, I told you, there is no, when you talk about Uganda, you are talking about yourself, you are talking about your neighbor, you are talking about UBC, you are talking about the trees, you are talking about the roads, you are talking about the dams. We have seen people saying, we are protecting, we are defending, we are coming in, and people are burning roads and celebrating. And he says he wants to become a Ugandan leader. People jumping on tables and beating others, and they say they are doing that for Uganda. So Uganda, when you say you love Uganda, you must look at, conceptualize who and what is Uganda. I have told you, I have brought it near. It is you, it is this table, it is that road, it is this tree, it is this power line, it is this school, it is this well, it is this building. So for you to love Uganda, you must be in love with all those, because you know it is those that make Uganda, and it is those that identify you. That's why we even talk about values. I want to thank our Deputy Speaker of Parliament. There is a clip I saw when he said, for as long as I'm Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda, this one will not happen. Because as Ugandans, we have interests, we have traditions, and we have values. How many Ugandans can stand in the face of many others, even those we call superior, and say, it is upon my that this will happen? When we are growing up, we used to draw a line. It says, Abuka Kano. How many of us have drawn a Ugandan line in terms of values and interests and traditions, that anybody who crosses that line, I will finish him? That's what I call patriotism.
Thank you, Major Kawesa. That brings me to the question, Nduguru Garama. Of course, we know very well that patriotism, just like many of the things that we learn as we go, is a very deliberate, calculated, well laid out, long-term investment in people, in the way they think, in the way they internalize whatever they see and hear. What, in your estimation, has gone wrong with our model of patriotism? Not just Ugandan, but across the continent.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to look at patriotism, once again drawing on the example of Senior Comrade Major Reeve from India, where he emphasized that the day I started having greater feelings for India than my own interests, I realized that I was being patriotic. The challenge, and this is where we have got a very daring and defining moment, that we have with patriotism is that we have got a growing number of Ugandans who are increasing on their appetite for self-aggrandizement rather than sacrificing for the country. We have got, unfortunately, and that doesn't mean that we don't have very good people who feel and work for this country, who are slaves for this country, who emphasize togetherness and cooperation, who are laying their lives for the expansion and inclusion. For instance, I will give you an example. I heard the president himself, when he was giving the president of the Republic of Uganda, when DRC had been admitted to the East African community, he said, and I quote, "This has been my long-time dream. I am personally very happy that something I worked on and dreamed of achieving has finally been achieved." Now, what was he going as an individual going to benefit from the inclusion of DRC in the East African community? That, to me, therefore, is one other mark of patriotism. But let me also note, and very quickly, that as long as we have got a number of Ugandans given the responsibility to handle government work, and they mishandle contracts at district level, at national level, as long as we have got people who are interested in our security forces and they renegade on their duties, as long as, unfortunately, we have got a very good record with UPDF, that or NRA, and now UPDF, that I must confess, it has been seen internally and outside. As long as we have got people who are given government ministries and parastatals to run, and they end up siphoning the little that is there, as long as cases of, for instance, the iron sheets and goats and dams like we used to have, money goes missing, as long as we establish a great number of parastatals to curb the corruption. Corruption is on the increase, and within corruption, the cases of nepotism and the rest. As long as, like Major Reeve says, we develop a crop of individuals whose appetite for self-interests and aggrandizement at the expense of the country's enrichment is up, the concept of patriotism will only remain on paper and in constitution of NRM and whichever other government wants to put it there for purposes of exciting the eyes of those who will be reading, and it will be meaningless to the people that live in that particular country. Now, on the bigger scale, patriotism, as long as it is misused, that we have got a situation in Israel whereby the Israelis continuously unabated without the interference of the international community and the backing of America and Britain and other sisters, go and cause mayhem in Palestine in the name of patriotism, that patriotism is problematic. As long as we have got the white, so-called white supremacists who are segregating and doing away with the interests of their other darker-skinned communities, segregating and segregating against them in health, in education, as long as the Martin Luthers of this world, the Malcolm X's of this world, the Marcus Garveys of this world, the Louis Farrakhan's of this world, the Dr. Umar's of this world are on the decline, who were fighting for the interests of the bigger communities. We have got an increasing rate of people who are coming in, the so-called LGTBs, for purposes of forwarding the interests which are narrow, myopic, and driving the entire bigger society on the death trap. The concept of patriotism will be dead on arrival. I want to conclude, therefore, that I am glad on the African continent we are doing everything humanly possible, against all odds, to make sure that we upgrade and appreciate by definition and practice the concept of patriotism by coming together and working together to help one another. Forget that we have got other limitations which time and again come in, like the xenophobic attacks. They were in South Africa, but we have got to counter them like Julius Malema countered them. Forget that we have got situations in North Africa, like in Tunisia, where Ivorians and Guineans are being expelled, but we must also rely on the shoulders of our forefathers. Remember that people like Osejefo Kwame Nkrumah had a wife from his brother Abdul Gamar of Egypt, and they forged a union that if, for instance, we could build on, we shall be in a better place. We are also pleased to get to know that on the regional, we have got regional economic blocks. We have got agencies on the African continent, like Africa Free Continental Trade Area, among others, which are geared towards emphasizing the concept of patriotism, that let us kill our Ugandanness, our Kenyanness, our Ghanaianness, not that we forget it at the expense of having the Africanness. I thank you.
You know, this concept of patriotism is actually more complex than meets the eye. For the simple reason, Mr. Putin, I'm sure, he says is a fervent Russian patriot, I imagine. Ukraine has had a history of being overshadowed or being on the tenterhooks on account of their giant neighbor for a solid 300 years. And in the 90s, shortly after the Soviet Union had collapsed, Ukraine dared to start walking down a path of its own choosing. And Russia has never forgiven Ukraine for trying to aspire as an entity. But those things are also not uncommon in many parts of the world, and that is the inspiration for the colonizer to always keep around. It's amazing. I never thought I would see the day when a French president is literally almost apologetic for hanging around, because these days there is a very fierce contest for resources coming from the Chinese, from the Indians, and the Europeans. So France, however humiliating it has been for these new strongmen in Mali and in Burkina Faso to actually say, we are tired and fed up, please get on the next plane and get out. Of course, in military terms, those countries don't have the capacity to expel France, militarily speaking. But France knows better that when the people of a particular country are bitter and aggrieved and form a solid unit, it becomes untenable to stick around. But still, like I said, they're still trying to further themselves, regardless of the fact that the people of Africa don't really want them around anywhere except upon their invitation. Ndugu Kawesa, patriotism is not a simple concept. Actually, one man's food. He actually claimed to be for the people of Germany. In that way, he oversaw the operation of exterminating millions of Jews, talking about he was purifying the blood of the Germans. He didn't want the contamination.
Special race.
Yes. He wanted a super race that did not involve, among them, homosexuals. They were also murdered. And these are the races. He said he was a patriot. And I'm sure the people who inflamed the tensions that spilled over into genocide in Rwanda here, I'm sure they were also driven by that same thinking. So where does patriotism stop and excessive and misguided zeal start?
Yeah, well, let me redefine my own understanding and appreciation of patriotism. I said it is love, loyalty, and a commitment to one's country and interests. So if you belong to a country whose interest is exterminating others, so be it. But I don't think there is any society that has interests of exterminating others.
Okay.
So whoever goes...
So that is not patriotism?
No.
Okay.
No. Because I've just said that you cannot lead an island life. And in the Ugandan context, or even those who are biblical, there is nobody who hated Christianity than Saul. And nobody worked for the building and the propagation of the Christian values than Paul. And these two are the same individual. What does this tell you? That even when you hate an individual, as a patriot, you have a way of bringing him towards your side to see reality and walk the talk, or walk your talk, or tow your interests. In Uganda, we've done it. The people we fought today, we are saluting commanders we were fighting yesterday, or we are fighting alongside those who were in trenches against us. Because for us, we look at interests. There could even be misguided brothers. The Christianity, the prodigal son, somebody can go against you, but when he has been misled, it is in your interest that you bring him back, find a way of bringing him back than killing him. So extermination, killing this and the other is not way. So the Hitler, the Abiarimanas, and many others, even the Konyi of this
and Putin.
world. And well, I have to get a different view of Putin. I don't know why. Maybe I need to read further. I look at Putin differently. Me, I look at Putin as a victim of...
Because you're a military officer?
The NATO
no,
aggression.
I look at Putin as a victim. Because...
No one attacked him?
Yes. No, sometimes you can do preemptive attack.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can attack you before you attack me, such that I don't... Because it is easier to beat you in your backyard than waiting for you to come my side. If I see you preparing to come and attack me, we did it in Congo here, and the people used to make a noise that, why do you go 4,000 miles? I used to use a very simple example. Me, I am a farmer, I come from Ruwero here. For us, the way we kill, I don't know what you call insanafi in English, these red ants that become a vast attack at night and you can't have a sleep. If you have a chibanja across mine, and it is where these red ants have their den, where they come from, we can talk and say, by the way, you have a problem in your backyard. Can we destroy it for our own interests? And you don't. Then I'm forced to come and do it either with your permission or without, to come and destroy it such that it does not disturb my cows, it does not disturb my sleep in the night. So in the same way...
You're looking at this thing as a military officer, this Putin situation.
Yes, but I use a farmer's analogy.
Okay,
if I have, if you have wild cats, let me use wild cats in your bush. People are free to let their land fallow. you let your land grow into a bush. By the way, somebody is taking me to court that my trees, the branches are threatening his house, and I want to gun. I received yesterday from a neighbor a letter they call it a letter of intent to sue.
Notice,
not
of intentions to sue.
To sue. I read it and
your trees are not patriotic.
Yeah, that they are bending dangerously into the neighbor's compound. Definitely, I'm looking for ways of ensuring that we stay good neighbors by removing those branches. So, if those walk up one day, probably I find them cutting the trees.
You'd understand why?
I would understand, because they are threatening their good life. Assuming this tree woke up at night and fell onto their house. Then, so good patriotism calls for good neighborliness. So if this man is Zelensky,
yes, of Ukraine,
with the people who are threatening the interests of Russia, I think it is in Russia's interest to subdue this man's potentials in, because you cannot allow, like if you're a lady, if you have your husband is X in the neighborhood, how comfortable
and they build an extension in your compound for this woman?
No, even if they don't build it, and they are just in the neighborhood. And in the neighborhood, there is probably a window through which they can whisper to each other.
She provocatively hangs her clothes in the view.
It would be in your interest that that window is closed, with or without the permission of the neighbor.
Because the permission wouldn't even come anyway.
Because it was put there. So now, patriotism, getting back to Hitler, I don't think that was patriotism. That was maybe, what do you call it? Tribal...
Misguided zeal.
Tribal chauvinism, that you think your tribe...
Chauvinism, actually.
It is your tribe that is superior, and anybody who does not think like you there. No, we are free to think and differently and live the way, for as long as our thinking does not disrupt the other people's thinking. So even as we faith in a prayer, there are people who pray, you make a lot of noise. God is not deaf. So you can go out to pray without necessarily disturbing others. So you can love yourself without necessarily disturbing others. But that love must take it into consideration that you cannot lead an island life.
Okay. Nduguru Garama, as we bring this discussion to a close, please give us your parting shots on tourism, where it is and where it could be on the African continent.
Tourism?
I'm sorry, patriotism.
Patriotism, okay. Now, my statement is very simple, Sister Takari and our dear viewers, that patriotism is no longer merely a definition in textbook, but it is a wider concept whereby interests across the board must be harmonized and enjoyed again across the board, comfortably, meaningfully, but mindful of each other's interests. When we get to a level where your interests must be against my interests in the name of patriotism, it's a risk for disaster, and we must avoid that at all material times.
Thank you so much. Major Kawesa, your parting shots on patriotism.
Uganda is under the national resistance movement for the next 5 years. And patriotism...
They're less than that at this point.
Yeah, patriotism and Pan-Africanism, like he said, are one of the stronger pillars of that institution. And even if it were not NRM, I think it is the right thing to do, to love ourselves and even love our neighbors and work together. What I need to tell the viewers is that Africa has been one society. We were only divided to make it easy for exploiters to take whatever they wanted. Now that we've realized that we need to work together, can we please close these borders and become one society? We need to educate ourselves, we need to grow food, we need to industrialize, we need to communicate, and we need to build a block of a market, and we also need to build a block of negotiators, such that when we talk as one voice. Africa is bigger than many of these other societies. Why are we beaten at our own game? Can we use our numbers, our resources, and our geographical size to stand firm and defend African interests?
Thank you, Ndugu Kawesa. And in conclusion, I'm reminded of a Swahili proverb that says the child of a snake is a snake.
Mtoto ya nyoka.
Nyoka.
So
I don't know who is the child of a snake.
Well, my own understanding of this proverb is that
the child of the colonial master is the colonialist.
The expressions that we are, that are true of us as an African continent, as a nation, as a state, are exactly who we are. Whether that is a good thing or that is a negative thing, we can choose to actually start walking in a direction that represents the society that we aspire to. As things stand, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you for joining us here on Pan-African Friday, and I'd like to express my gratitude to Uganda Broadcasting Corporation that has afforded me and other women a platform to actually do our thing without encumbrances. And until next Friday, hopefully Ndugu James Muruta will be back with us. Stay well.